founder themselves gets detached really early. Do you even know what the value is if you haven't heard it yourself? You're good enough.
The only way you ever learn anything isn't by going through scenarios in your head.
Fear doesn't make anybody better.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pick Now podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Munn, and today's guest, Brittany Greenfield, founder of the software security firm Wabbi and host of the new Good Enough podcast. Brittany, welcome to my podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
So you and I both have entrepreneurial journeys in common. I think you were more of an out of the gate, out of the box entrepreneur than I was. I was pretty late to the entrepreneurial scene. When's the moment you realized, hey, I think I'm an entrepreneur?
When did I know I was an entrepreneur? I think I always knew I had some of those tendencies. You know, the buzzword around it is an entrepreneur, because I identified new market strategies and opportunities for companies from startups to Fortune 50 companies. And it was really, I was in my career. I was finally sort of, really in the leadership position. And I got a bug under my skin for something we couldn't solve as a company. It wasn't in our domain. It would be inappropriate. And I was talking to an investor that's a friend. And he said, you've spent your entire career building effectively companies for other companies. Why don't you go do it for yourself? And that was the first time I think I put the two pieces together, because I just always went, I'm a little bit like, do you remember Mickey's Fantasia? Let me bring the hippos and the brooms together to dance in a beautiful ballet. I always thought that was my skill set. And then I realized it has a name, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, cool. So what was your career before you decided to start Wabbi?
I've always been in enterprise software, and like I said, everything from startups to Fortune 50 companies, public, private, but I got into it at a time that I actually had to explain what the word startup was to a friend of mine. My friends all went, why aren't you going to iBanking consulting or going to law school and figure out what you want to do with your life while you're there? Yeah. And then on top of it, I went into this brand new thing called the cloud. So once I got over that hurdle of calling it a startup, they were like, so you're working for the weather service? And I was like, just give it 5 years and everybody's going to know what the cloud is. I promise. Right. Yeah. Let's have this conversation in 5 years.
Of being early, like, you're onto something, but other people might not understand.
And we just don't think about it nowadays. Those words become just part of our common vernacular, and people want to go into startups, right? I think everybody thinks Google's still a startup, and it was fun getting to do something a little bit different. I'd say my career probably really started even before I graduated from college, because I just always took the road less taken.
Very cool. And so where did the idea for Wabbi come from? Like you said, you saw this thing that your current employer, and I don't know who that was at the time, wasn't able to do. And I think you even said it would be inappropriate for them to do.
Correct. Yeah. So cybersecurity, like all of tech, right? It has a lot of different niches in it. And the world that I was in at the time is called the endpoint. So your computer, your phone, a server, etc. Think of it like a home security system. When somebody enters my home that's not supposed to be there, I want to know about it and stop it as fast as possible. But I started to realize I was talking so much with our prospects and customers and analysts, and the root was actually that 9 out of 10 breaches begin due to defects in software. So back to the house analogy, that's like saying, well, the house was built wrong, so that somebody could actually access the house through a window, or the wrong lock was installed on the front door. You wouldn't want to put a bathroom lock on the front door because somebody could pop it with a pin. And so I really wanted to get to the foundation. And that's where Wabbi came from, to say, what can we do to help security and development teams meet each other in the middle, so security teams don't have to become experts in development and development teams don't have to become experts in security for us to build more secure software.
So tell me the conversation with your investor friend that because that's a big leap to go from employee to, oh, I'm going to start a company.
It is, but I think you could probably resonate with this. It wasn't foreign to me when he said that. I'd say the
Hmm.
bigger thing that was foreign to me was we built up, this was around the time of, the HBO show Silicon Valley,
Uh-huh.
obviously,
Yeah.
Facebook, hoodie wearing. A founder is somebody that writes code in a basement or some kind of creepy shared house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm a technical person, but I don't write code because it's like saying I'm an artist just because I can finger paint. I learned early in
Hmm.
my career that I should not write code. There are people that can do it far better, but I understand the mechanics of it.
Uh-huh.
And so I went, well, I can't possibly be a founder because I don't write code.
Right.
And basically he said bullshit, right?
Yeah.
In fact, you're bringing so much more value. We typically have to hire somebody
Right.
like yourself to come in and build the company, not just the product. Because at the end of the day, what do you think is harder? Building a product or making people care about it and
Hmm.
delivering it? And
Yeah.
I went, okay, now I can kind of see your point about the fact that this is what I've been doing for other companies. I'm not saying I went out and started the company the next day. It probably took about 6 months because I wanted to make sure, I think so many founders nowadays go, I've got an idea. Well, it's not enough to have an idea. You have
Yeah.
to have a good idea that can be executed, and it has to be at the right time. And that's where I think my expertise really came in, was that I could look at those market dynamics and say, hey, this is actually the right time to do this. There's a reason this has surfaced in my world. And now it's
Hmm.
the right time where people actually want to go buy it. Because if you build a
Hmm.
product and nobody buys it, can you call it a product?
The advantage and disadvantage that you had of not being a coder,
Mhm.
the advantage was you're not
So
tempted to get into the technical details.
correct. Not just
It-
that. I'm not just writing it because it's shiny. I did a lot
right.
of research before I had to pay
Right.
somebody to write it.
Well, and that's the disadvantage. You had to hire someone out of the gate. A lot of
Correct.
founders,
And
it's like, I've got an idea and I'm going to go code it and it's going to be brilliant. And then they wonder why it doesn't go anywhere, but at least they didn't spend a lot of money, figuring that out.
correct,
Yeah.
exactly. So both require discipline for different reasons on
Yeah.
opposite sides of it. But it meant that I did what I'd always done. I went and did what I now, because I'm a real company, get to call customer advisory boards, which were largely knocking at people's doors, going, "Will you
Yeah.
sit down and go through this?" But wireframes. If the camera was faced the opposite way, you'd see the first wireframe, which I drew, which basically
Uh-huh.
explained a relational database. And you'd also understand why I didn't go into art school. And I use that analogy about finger painting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did. I took them in. I said, "What do you expect when you're here? What do you expect?" And those were all the things that there's a reason you see actually the most successful entrepreneurs be 40 plus, because they have experience. I had learned that in
Right.
big organizations. I had led teams through this. So I just had to remember how to bring it down to scale, and with a
Yeah.
little more like grit and willingness to do some uncomfortable things like call strangers.
Right. Yeah. I had a couple roles over the course of my corporate career where I was responsible for calling strangers, not
Yeah.
necessarily strangers, but
Yeah.
that
Not
sales aspect. And it's
correct.
absolutely helpful slash critical when you're going to build something on. I'm a solopreneur, so I didn't have quite the the responsibilities that you do building a company and thinking about it from that perspective. But just calling someone and saying, "Hey, I want to tell you about this thing that I
Right.
do," is really daunting for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. And I actually think I think the best founders do start out as solopreneurs, right?
Hmm.
At one point in time, it was just the me show.
Yeah.
And so I had to make all those uncomfortable calls. I think it's, if you want me to get on my soapbox, it's part of the problem that with investing nowadays, everybody's
Hmm.
getting these massive checks out of the gate before they even have gone and made these uncomfortable calls. And
Yeah.
the founder themselves gets detached really early, which, and so because they can go hire a BDR to make this call
Right.
versus constantly getting that feedback from the prospects, good and bad.
Yeah. And how do you train a BDR before you've gone through that yourself?
Correct. How do you even know what the value is if you haven't heard it yourself? Right.
Right.
There's a time and a place. The place, when you're ready to scale, that's when you start to bring it on. And that's a different exercise. We've gone through this as we've built our sales team. As a founder, you have so much tacit knowledge that sometimes it's hard to translate. And that's why you have to get it out of you.
Yeah.
But in the early days, we're all solopreneurs, right? We should
Yeah.
all be out there or hitting the pavement, making these tough calls, no matter how uncomfortable we are.
So what year did you start Wabbi?
A great question, depending on how you define it.
Is that difficult? Yeah.
So I went out on the journey to start Wabbi in 2018 and did the initial research, started development in 2019. And then we were going to have our debutante moment in April of 2020. So obviously,
good timing. Yeah.
Yeah, great timing. By then, I talk about all the research I did. Well, one of the reasons I didn't hire, I used a third-party development team for our alpha and our beta because I needed to know who I actually needed to hire as a development team and who I needed as a VP of engineering, what skills and perspectives they had. And so our VP of engineering, our first VP of engineering started March 23rd of 2020. I literally put his laptop in his trunk. We'd fortunately spent some time together, so we'd had a bond. Yeah. But I remember laying on my couch on the 22nd going, what am I doing, right? Bringing somebody else on this entrepreneurial journey. Hey, should I call him and tell him to go back to his job? Because I knew that they would have him back. It's uncertain enough going on this journey, let alone at a pandemic.
Right. So you said you were kind of doing this tour and getting the concept and talking to people in 2018 and 2019. Were you doing that full time or were you doing that on the side?
I was doing it full time. I left full time to do it. And I did still do consulting on the side, right? One of the best pieces of advice I got early on was everything will take 6 months longer than you think.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And correct. And easily. And so I was still doing some consulting on the side, but it's one of the things that I say to entrepreneurs that, your head's got to be in it, which means your time's got to be in it. You got to show that you're actually doing it because, it's one thing. I had to go find consulting that I could be detached from. Turns out I ended up helping a lot of people build pitch decks, ironically.
Interesting.
Pitch decks and board decks. Yeah. Turns out people aren't good at that. Yeah. I guess I was. And but it was easy for me to leave it behind. Great. Yeah. You wanted to say this. I'll give you my strategic advice. And if you don't like it, move on. And so, but you had to spend the time to be there. I couldn't spend 6 months doing research with customers. And if I wasn't giving them the same respect that they were giving me or future customers.
Okay. So 2 years of prep, you hire your first employee. How long does it take for this to kind of take off and grow? And just for context for people, where are you today?
Yep. So I'll start with the second question first. So we still run a pretty lean team. We've actually taken advantage of the fact that COVID opened up, what you could call more gig work or fractional work. So we're about 10 people, but we use a lot of fractional work, marketing. We don't need a full-time DevOps person. Same with security. We outsource that to an MSSP who's a partner. So we've been very lean and creative in terms of how we can maximize that. We have a fractional sales resource that sort of acts as a channel partner for us. We got up close to $1 million in revenue. And we're which is hard to do without big checks. We've only raised $3 million. And so that bootstrapping helps us build a better company. And it's also helped us weather the times where we've had to go, not necessarily pivot, but say, let's take a breath on how we advance to the next stage, right? And sometimes it's not always the prettiest, and you don't want a big bloated marketing team if you don't need them to be doing marketing at the time. And so that's where we are today. What was our launch point? I'd say we rolled out, the beginning of 2020 was a little weird. We sort of just kept our heads down and just kept working on product development. We did not want to put pressure on people, especially the teams that we were dealing with, security teams. They had to deal with a whole new reality with remote work. So we more so just kept up our pipeline, kept them warm, checked in, Chatham House Rules sessions. When we had our first big moment was at the beginning of 21, and there's a conference called the RSA conference in our industry that does the top 10 next big things in the industry.
What does RSA stand for?
RSA is three people's names.
Okay.
So RSA is one of the iconic original cybersecurity companies.
Okay.
And so if you remember the old government breach, but tokens, that physical token you see people, they invented that. That was where they.
Yeah, I remember that. I hadn't thought about those in a while. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Right. The original authenticators.
Yeah.
And
I never did understand how those work, but
correct. And it's still a little magic. I still appreciate the magic in my industry. And but so they started the conference, and then it became the industry conference. And so they, take a lot of care to go out and research the top 10 next big things. And we were one of the top 10. And that was sort of the big moment that you went, okay, this isn't just a project where we have a couple of people that are like, this is a cool tool I'm using. They went, no, this is a moment. And obviously that brings some great attention to you. That's how we landed our seed round from it. And, so it sort of took a year, I'd say. Are you familiar with the founders, entrepreneurs life cycle, right? The peak of excitement, trough of despair, plateau. And, as you go through that, you learn some lessons. You start to learn, no matter how much customer feedback you get, once you put it in their hands, they're going to tell you things that they don't like, and they're going to break it. And so that's sort of, you go through the trough of despair. So we went through and had to do some re-engineering. But when we did that, we said, we've got to double down on our usability. We learned a lot about our end user through the process. So it may have been painful to lose some customers at the time, but we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't.
So you had what I would call, a big break by being featured at this conference, right?
Yep.
Did that just happen? Did you do a lot of work behind the scenes to get
I'm glad you said that. It did not
underestimate how, those things don't just like, hey, I got a postcard in the mail. They want me to speak at a conference.
Correct. And the actual funny stories, I thought it was spam when they emailed me. No, but it takes a lot of work. It takes, I think, again, this gets to that little bit of highlight reel entrepreneurship, Hollywoodification of it. It doesn't to have that big moment on the stage. I mean, that was a year of preparing and hoping we were doing the right things, hoping our name was getting out there, spending a lot of time talking to analysts or just, talking to other investors and customers that surface these names. And so, you get the big moment on the stage, which is only 3 minutes, and it's a year of work getting there.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's really important. And I think even to be able to have the wherewithal to identify, hey, if we were featured at this conference, really cool things could start to happen.
Correct.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Agreed. And you can't be everything to everybody, right? You can't do it all at once. I think so often people get focused on these big goals, right? Be at the conference or launch my product or whatnot. You have to remember to bring it back into what are the things I have to do today to advance towards it. The analogy I always use is, I'm here in Boston. We just had the marathon, and you don't show up and go, I'd like to run a marathon. You go, okay, well, let me show up by running 1 mile today, then 5 miles. And then you also have to remember, you actually often don't even run the full marathon. Most marathoners only run like 13 miles. So you can't be waiting until you've run a full marathon to actually put it out into the world. Okay, I can do 13 miles. Therefore I can do 26.2. Great.
Wow.
Not something I plan on doing.
Yeah.
But you have to remember it's the decisions you make every day, and they're not always going to be the right decisions, by the way. You're going to learn from some of the wrong ones too and iterate.
Well, and I think the other thing that people forget is you spent a year being featured at this conference and the 3 minutes and,
Mhm.
and all that. Even if all that goes perfectly, that's only the beginning.
Correct. It's
That just
only
gets you in the door to a bunch of opportunities that then you have to deliver. It's like
correct.
there's no finish line to this thing.
There is no finish line, and I think what you can do, I'll go back to the marathon analogy, right, is but you do have mile markers.
Yeah.
You say, I've achieved goal X. I made it to mile 1. I made it to mile 2. But you do have to make sure you're very clear about that, because
Right.
otherwise, especially as a founder or just a leader, if you are
Mhm.
not clear about that, you can end up circling around, well, have I actually achieved it or not?
Right.
And it's easy when you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to this is my personal bad tendency to revert to, well, it's not perfect, therefore I haven't actually hit this mile marker, I haven't hit this next step where I can then move on
Right.
to how I continue to grow it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We tend to, like, I'm a big fan of Dan Sullivan, and
Mhm.
he's got a concept. I'm blanking on the words for the concept. Maybe it'll come to me, Brittany. But the idea is that um, we evaluate where we are against our
Mhm.
potential rather
Yeah.
than actually
Yeah.
looking back and seeing all the things we've accomplished.
Correct. And this is one of the things that I preach. One of the things we were talking about in the green room.
Yeah.
Uh, as a founder, turns out you also become a coach slash therapist.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I want to get into that because you seem like you have a number of side activities that are just
it's
as
I
busy
do.
as your day job.
And one of the things I have to, when I work with other leaders, I have to remind them you're good enough. I
Mhm.
literally came up with a principle called good enough, because
Uh-huh.
somewhere we hit a, a point in our career and we go, we're not good enough, and we forget the fact that we got there because we are good enough, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes this weird negative thing, and it's exactly that, where you start measuring yourself against potential, not what you've actually done, and it's like we lose our memory on it.
Right. Well, and I think what I've seen with a number of the founders that I coach is that the more successful they are and the more pressure they feel, the more they feel like they have to lose, the more
Correct.
they feel like, oh, when it was just me, it was one thing, but now I have 100 employees and 100 families that are counting on me to do the right thing. They get into overanalysis, perfectionism, paralysis. They can't do anything. And I mean, my concept is called pick now, where it's
Mhm.
just like you're gonna, just do something.
Correct.
You
It
you
just
have to. The only way you ever learn anything isn't by going through scenarios in your head. It's by putting it out into the world and seeing how people react to it.
exactly, and that's the only way that you'll iterate. They may not all
Yeah.
be perfect, but doing something is better than analyzing it in
Yeah.
perpetuity.
Yeah.
And I think it's also one of the things, it's true, right? We can both feel that. When a founder says that, you go, I feel you. Every decision does have the weight of the world on your shoulders, because you asked people to come along on this journey with you, and it's your
Yeah.
responsibility to make sure. At least I think the good founders. There are other founders that are just into it for the buzziness of it, right? They don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
And there's what you just said hit two thoughts. The reason I say the good founders, there's a curve, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's perceived knowledge versus experience. So when you
Uh-huh.
have no experience in something, you go something like skiing. You
Is
have
this the Dunning-Kruger effect?
yeah, Dunning-Kruger, but there's another curve too. But yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Same
And
kind of idea that the less you know, the more you think you do.
correct. So
Yeah.
you have zero knowledge about something. Like, I'm a big skier, and so people go, I've never skied before, but I think I can do it. Right.
Uh-huh.
And then you go out for your first day or two and you're like, I'm feeling great. I conquered this bunny hill. I'll be on the double blacks. Right.
Yeah.
But you don't know how little you don't know. And then you actually learn a lot about it and you're just always thinking about the risks. And so that's why I say the people that are more seasoned, that really do think about the business as a whole, you then suddenly have less confidence about running a business than the people that know absolutely nothing about it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you, the good enough, you're, starting a podcast around this, you're coaching around this. How did all this happen?
Yeah, I'd say really it was from my own lessons. I had to create it for myself. As we've talked about here, you put yourself in, whether you're a founder position or just a high performing leader, you end up in this position and you become your worst tendencies, which, as I said, for me, and something we've bonded over, is overthinking, perfectionism, and so it was really what I had to apply to myself. Which was, okay, don't spend more than 45 minutes on a task. And when you get to the end of it, decide if it's done or if you need another 45 minutes on it. But you've got to have that clear goal line about what's actually contributing to progress and where am I just nitpicking because it feels actually safer. It feels like I'm being responsible. And then, as I said, you become, when you're a founder, a lot of people just naturally reach out, you're doing a lot more networking. And you have these conversations, and I realized I was onto something. I wasn't the only person out there. And so I had the chance to work with not just leaders in the tech industry, small business owners, as I said before, those of us that have the entrepreneurial heart, whether it's as part of another company, we're a special form of masochists. And I think a lot of times we think we're alone in it. And I realized one of the most powerful assets you could be is actually being vulnerable. And that's how you can get some help.
Yeah. So how do you fight that tendency in yourself?
There are really three critical things. One, I already mentioned.
Yeah.
I do not let myself spend more than 45 minutes on a task. And that forces me to say, what can I accomplish in this 45 minutes, back to the mile marker, or that's going to allow me to walk away from this in 45 minutes for a variety of reasons. One, none of us should be sitting down for more than 45 minutes, right? Stand up, refresh your water bottle. But two, our brains actually need the space to digest stuff, right? There's a reason we have the saying, I'll sleep on it, right? I don't need to go take a nap, but I need to move around a little bit. So that's rule number one. The second.
So I want to just make sure I clarify this. So what I'm inferring from what you're saying is 45 minutes, but then you're taking a break. You're not just going off to the next task.
Correct. Yeah. That is such an important distinction. You got to stand up, move around. Maybe even it's just looking at something dumb. This is where social media is good, right? Give your brain the chance to focus on something the complete opposite, so it has time to absorb the work that you've done, and then start to make other decisions. So you can come back.
Is there any magic in the 45-minute period itself?
It's two things. One actually came from when I set meetings. I always set meetings for 45 minutes. That way you have a little bit of run over, or if you need to, right? Oh, I need to finish the sentence or something. But some of it's, they do actually, in science says 45 to 60 minutes. Some will say deep work sessions up to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Nobody should be going past that, right? And so that's where the 45 minutes comes from. It's very congruous with how we block our days. And again, right, if you can't get enough done in 45 minutes, you've made it too big of a goal, too big of a task, or to be able to make forward progress and forward momentum.
So if you have a bigger project, you're going to chunk it down into 45-minute pieces as best you can.
Exactly. So I literally, at the beginning of the day, despite being in tech, my super fancy productivity system is whatever piece of scrap paper is lying around, order form, whatever. And I
use envelopes.
Yeah, exactly. And you dump it down, and it's really important that you actually handwrite it. for
Yeah.
two reasons. One, you create better neural connections that when you do go to solve the problem, it'll trigger your critical thinking and creative thinking in areas better than if you just type something. There was a reason man was even chiseling stuff early days, right? You just get better engagement. The second thing is you also reduce your mental burden when you just put it out there. So rather than saying, I have to write a board deck, and that may be one of my task items, when I do my messy list, okay, I got to do the board deck, but what do I actually have to do to get there? Got to go do my financials. I got to get the report from marketing. I got to get the report from sales. And then, I've got to go probably spend 20 minutes finding a board template I like better than the one I used last time, right? And so that it forces me to think about not, oh my God, I have to spend the day doing the board deck. Nope. In 45 minutes, I can go pull a QuickBooks report or talk to my CFO to do that. And then read it and review it, make notes, and then decide when I get to the end, is this good enough for me to go ahead and put it into my template? Or do I need to go back and maybe schedule a second meeting with my CFO? I think this is where, so you have to actually put a different lens on. You have to think about your stakeholders. Board decks are great as example, because there's so many people involved. You have to support your team who's going to have to go present their own piece of the board deck. You have to make sure that you feel confident with the information in it. And then your board members have to be happy. So let's use the board member as a stakeholder perspective. What do they want? Something easy to read, something timely so they can read it in advance. And then they are going to want their questions followed up on. What that actually means for anybody that's had to prepare a board deck or a prospect deck or whatnot means it really doesn't have to be perfect, right? So it's better to get it to them a week in advance rather than 12 hours in advance, because you made it perfect, but there's going to still be questions on it, therefore, that you can't predict, right? Therefore, you'll end up setting another iteration. And you're not putting them in a position where they're stressed because they have to read it 12 hours before the meeting, right? Have you spent the time preparing your team for the questions that you think are going to come back, et cetera? So when you put the lens of the stakeholder on, by the way, that stakeholder could be just yourself. Did I make the dinner reservations I was supposed to, right? And you go, what's good enough on it? Did I send, an email to my board for the board meeting? I'm probably going to be a little more formal in it. So I'm going to spend more time. So that might be a task I assign 45 minutes to it. Am I being clear about this? Have I double checked that it's the right draft, et cetera? Versus yesterday, I had my bi-weekly board update. Hey guys, have anything to talk about? Nope. Cool. Catch you in 2 weeks, right? That's a very informal one that I sent from my phone. And so there's context and stakeholder, and that's what allows you to triangulate on it. And then you start to get, like all things, it's about building the habit. You start to get a gut, and then you need to let your gut tell you this is good enough, right? This satisfies all the points. And by defining it up front, you don't question yourself on the tail end.
Yeah, I know I personally tended to over-index on what was good enough for a long time. And I think what I encourage my clients to do is come up with small experiments and just test and then see. It's like, I think this is what I kind of see what happens, see if this is in fact good enough. Because it's almost like your nervous system is designed to like sound a 5-alarm fire when it's not perfect. At least mine is. And to get that to dial down a little bit, it takes some time and effort.
It does. And for people getting started with this, I love the experiments. I even say something like, okay, in your first 45-minute block, just do 5 emails that you've been putting off, right? Not the most important ones, but the scheduling ones or the I have to deliver some bad news ones. And when you do that, you stop overthinking, because your definition of success at the end of that 45 minutes is, did I get those 5 emails out or not, right? Not, did I write Shakespeare's next masterpiece? Did I do something that will allow somebody to respond to me and then I can take the next action? And I find, starting with small things like that rewards your system, which again, as leaders, we often are dealing in the world of hard and not fun things, right? Because by the
Right.
time something hits your desk, it's difficult. And let alone if you're an entrepreneur and it's just all negative, right? And sometimes, and so you get those positive rewards, and those positive rewards, as you were saying with your clients, start to build. And then that reminds people that like the only way to move forward is one done at a time.
Right.
You can't, it's not one big thing, it's just one tiny step. And that's what gets you there, whether it's an experiment or an email.
Well, and to your point about the difficult decisions,
Mm-hmm.
those can take up a lot of bandwidth
Correct.
and they can feel really important.
Correct.
Those are the ones that tend to like, I've been thinking about, I'm not sure my CFO is working out, but I'm not sure where to find the next one. And I don't know what the team would do in the interim. And I don't know, blah, 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 blah. It's like, if you need to do it, it's like the example that I say is, well, what if your CFO, the CFO who you want to fire, what if
Mm-hmm.
your CFO walked in today and quit?
Right. What would you do
You,
then?
you would figure it out, and you'd
Mm-hmm.
figure it out pretty quickly.
Correct.
So why are you spending so much time on figuring it out
It,
now?
I call it having conversations with yourself that have never happened, right?
Yeah,
Like they never
exactly. Which
happen.
is like all of them.
Exactly. Right, exactly. And there's no reason in your gut, if you have, if the flag has already come up that you need to get
Yeah.
rid of your CFO, why
Yeah.
did you question that? Now,
Yeah.
the next step would be, okay, I'm getting rid of the CFO. What's the transition plan? Do I just
Mhm.
fire him out of the gate because it's so
Yeah.
bad? Or is this one where I'm going to go start gathering some information about what he's doing so I can
Yeah.
build the spec?
We're
And
going to paper the file. Are we going to do that? Yeah.
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you get out of that, but you do have to remember that you have gotten to this position because you have those skills. So why
Mhm.
are you questioning yourself? And this is where I go back to, why, I said it tongue in cheek the first time. And then everybody was like, oh yeah, no, I guess I do need to remember I am good enough. My skills are good enough. I got here for a reason. So
Right.
stop. Why are you questioning yourself? Because you're the best expert in your job.
Well, what I love about good enough, and it's funny because I actually use it in a negative way, but we'll get to that.
Okay, I'm going to pick on
There's
you.
like there's these multiple meanings of the phrase. Good
Mhm.
enough in terms of like my own sense of self-worth, right?
Right.
There's that. Good enough in terms of like, it doesn't need to be perfect. Move
Correct.
forward. There's
Right.
that aspect of it. For me, I will talk about what I call the curse of good enough,
Mhm.
which is when someone is in a job that's like decent, but not
Yeah.
really, it's like, well, I don't want to risk, I'm making good money. Like one of my first clients, we got on a call and she literally told me, I'm making more money doing this than I could anywhere else.
Mhm.
And if I can only last 10 more years, then I can do what I want. And it's just like, oh my God, that sounds awful.
Right.
And I said, so what if, just as a possibility, what if you could go someplace and make more money doing something you enjoy more? Would that
Mhm.
be of interest? And it took like 9 or 10 months of concerted effort on her part, but she did it. And was a hell of a lot happier. Like
It
we closed down the possibilities.
correct.
And we think it's risk. It's really just about staying safe. And it's about, we're afraid.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
We start operating from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And when you operate from a place of fear, nothing will ever be good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your client's example, right? Well, the safety of staying in something that I don't enjoy, but I make good money in. Well,
Right.
that's good enough for me right now. And there may be a time and a place for that, right? You have
Yeah.
something, but clearly it was not by the time she was talking to you. Rather
Right.
than let me explore what might be out there, because that's scary. The unknown is scary.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all have to remember is that we are doing our jobs because we're actually good at handling the unknown. So take solace in that, but there's very few things that can go super horribly wrong as long as you take a structured approach to it. I wouldn't say to, I'm sure you wouldn't either. I wouldn't say to your client, like, quit your job, and then maybe in the next 6 to 9 months, you can find a better one that makes
Yeah,
more
you
money.
go tell your boss to fuck off today.
Right. You walk in there. Exactly. And you probably didn't do that. You probably, I'm guessing, said, let's come up with a plan. Why don't we start? And this is advice I give to everybody looking for a new job from, straight out of college. But why don't you go on? I don't even know what the monster equivalent is nowadays, but go on the job boards, pick up a bunch of job descriptions, ignore the title, and go pick the bullet points that you like. Right. And that will help you find out. So that's step 1. Step 2, go find companies that can pay you what you're worth. Step 3, whatever. You got to, this is why, not to sound like a broken record, but that's what our jobs are, is this is why you have to break the big goal of getting your dream into tiny daily little goals, because otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if you don't show up to the gym and get your 6-pack or run the 26.2 miles today, well, I shouldn't have even bothered trying.
Right.
Versus it didn't work today, but tomorrow's another day.
Yeah. Okay. So how many gigs do you have going on right now, Brittany?
I guess it depends how you categorize them. Obviously Wabbi is my love. It is my first child. So it gets most of my attention, but the starting a podcast has been fun. It helps. I talk about at the end of that.
Why not?
Right. It's exactly, it's a different creative side of my brain, getting to put that out there, have conversations with people like yourself. So I call that my intellectual playtime, which I think everybody should have. And then I do, still coach and consult with both leaders that are just looking for a little bit of this, like you, how do I get over my overthinking and perfectionism so that way I can achieve my next goal? And then one of the things naturally that's come up as well is how can I actually use AI to help me advance myself, my team, my organization? I think, cybersecurity has always been a place very rich for AI training because of all the data that you collect. So I've been, without even paying attention to it, doing this for years before it became, the buzzword du jour. And I think, again, it gets to this very practical implementation. The best organizations implementing AI are the ones that are actually willing to put friction in and that aren't getting caught up in the tidal wave of, I just have to implement AI and have a strategy on that. And they're putting friction in. They're asking people to break the steps down. And so, to me, again, some of it's selfish because it lets me stay ahead of the curve on it too, and, but so also, help out some folks with that too.
And so is there a cost of you running so hard in so many different directions? Like, how does that show up for you? When do you know, hey, I need to take a break? And what does that look like?
I mean, you mean before I run into the wall? I'm not great at that.
What does running into the wall look like?
Running into the wall looks like being bad at responding to text messages and emails, the simple ones, right? This gets back to that perfection. Oh my God, I don't know exactly when I can see this person, rather than saying, hey, I don't know when, I'll get back to you, right? Or I didn't do it just right. I didn't find the right restaurant for the perfect occasion. So that's one. And, and second is actually when I don't keep up my habits, right? When I hate running, despite using it as a great analogy. If I don't do my Sunday night run, which happens to be at my club and I can get a drink afterwards in a sauna, when I don't do that, I know I'm off the rails and I have to come back and say, start with the simple things. The simple thing could be not necessarily what's my work to-do list, what's my weekend to-do list, grocery shopping, whatnot. Find the way, you talked about it earlier, how can I get those simple wins? And so that's when I know that's my level set, when I'm not keeping up with the things that I don't have to think about. Dishes in the sink, right? I hate dishes in the sink. When I'm like, can I keep that? But the other side of it, and it's certainly not for everybody, the things I do on the side aren't a distraction. They're a way of nurturing the other pieces of me. I think you can probably, resonate with this. As an entrepreneur, sometimes our identity gets so tied to the company or our clients and all of the above that you need to make the time to do those other things. And for me, the fact that it's a little bit structured, right? I have to record a podcast every week. Great. It's that habit. Same as doing my run. And so I would argue there's always going to be a saturation point, but it's not about volume of activity. It's about quality of activity. And when the quality goes down, that's when I go, okay, let me take a break on this. And I'm not perfect on scheduling, but calendars are a beautiful thing. Task lists are a beautiful thing. I actually, back to the handwritten paper, I do have a notebook. Take any notebook, it could be anything. And I do actually write out not just what my workout schedule is, but what my evening commitments are. Because if I don't have enough holes, everybody I think nowadays thinks about filling up the holes in their schedule. If I don't have enough holes, I know I'm starting to get to that burnout point.
Yeah. Why do you think we so compulsively make ourselves busy?
Isn't that the question? I think it gets to that overthinker, perfectionist personality.
Well, I think it gets to that not enough thing.
It's not enough. Correct. We're constantly trying to prove that we are.
Why do we think that? Like, do we all have? I mean, I have some childhood scars around that. Most people I talk with at any level of depth have that stuff. Like, why do we keep doing that to ourselves?
I think some of I'm going to give you two theories. I don't think that they go together necessarily.
Totally fine.
And the third one could also be I'm a Virgo, and apparently that's what Virgos do. But one, I think people that end up being high performing leaders, whatever. And by the way, when I say leader, a leader could be somebody that is leading without necessarily a formal role.
Sure.
Right. It could be at any organization, whether you are a founder or, you're in Fortune 50, right? I think one of the things is that we get to where we are, not just because we're good enough, but because we did a lot of the little things early on and we got rewarded for saying, yes, I can do it all. And that's actually a special skill. And so you get that a little bit baked into you. I think the second half of it has nothing to do with the past. It has to do with just our skill sets that have allowed us to get there. So not the reward piece, but we're always looking for the next challenge. Mm-hmm. And the next challenge does actually grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And when we were early on, the next challenge was a 1-step challenge. Maybe it was a 2-step challenge. And then it was a 3-step challenge. And, back to my earlier point, by the time things hit us at this point in our career, in our leadership journey, these are very complex challenges. And I think we forget that we've got to break them down. We got to get back to fundamentals because we assume people think we're just going to show up with the answer. Mm-hmm. And that's why, there's also the external component that success nowadays seems to be based off of activity, not output.
Right.
Right. How many emails
on Instagram?
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. How many emails did you send today? And here's how I'm a billionaire by 3 p.m. Right. Every day. Right. And it's hard because we feel that we're doing a lot of the work and then we don't have that. And even though we're smart enough to know Instagram versus reality.
Right. Here's my 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. routine. That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Exactly. I found waking up 3 hours early instead of getting the right amount of sleep, doing intermittent fasting, drinking my kombucha and everything by 9 a.m. I made $1 million today. And you're like, it doesn't, it's just, and therefore we put this pressure on ourselves to say, well, I've got to go do more of the work. It's a little bit of I have to remind people, just because you can doesn't mean you should, and it's, same feeling that a lot of the founders you work with, the weight of the world is on my shoulders if I get this wrong. Therefore, I will work ad infinitum. So at least I know I've put my best out there. But then there's no finish line, right? Then you don't know what
Yeah,
best
never.
actually is.
Yeah, I think what I try to get people to do is you've got two things that we put together,
Mhm.
and they do not belong together. One is, what challenges do you want to take on?
Correct.
And we naturally want to create and learn and grow and challenge ourselves. That's just human. We will find ways to do that until we die. My 80-year-old mother-in-law, she finds challenges every day. They're in like brain games on her phone.
Mhm.
It's just instinctive, right?
Right.
And the other is our sense of self-worth.
Mhm.
And we think my ability to meet or not meet a challenge, it means something about my worth as a person, and it does not.
Correct.
And when you can pull those things apart and just say, what would I create because I feel drawn to create it and it would be really cool and fun? Wow. Like the whole flavor of your life changes.
I could not agree more, right? The self-worth thing I think is really important. And I think that's the pressure you put on yourself. Because and forget even the Instagram era of leadership. It is, if I don't do this right, I'm letting a bunch of people down.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, if you do nothing because you're so focused on getting it right, you're letting people down. And if you get it wrong, you're not going to really let anybody down. It's better that you do it and get it wrong than get hung up on saying this has to be perfect. And I think that's where it's back to the fear, operating out of fear. Fear doesn't make anybody better. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, so what can I do to dispel that fear? Oh, my self-worth isn't going to be good if I get this wrong. How many successful people are there out there that have failed several times? It's great, right? So sometimes you do have to go out and say, where can I find examples to dispel this notion I have created?
And what is that failure? I hate the word failure because it's really, it's just an arbitrary, I choose whether to define something as failure or like, oh, this is perfect information for the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think you said, and it's something we take on as founders, that an organization grows to a certain size and you don't see it anymore. And that is, I'm responsible for these people.
Correct.
Like, these people are all adults.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They have a variety of employment opportunities. They have skills they brought to you that if you blow it, they can take those skills somewhere else. You have not somehow rendered them unemployable.
Correct. And if they are, they should consider their employment, right?
I mean, you take your best shot and they take their best shot. And sometimes it's with you and sometimes it's with the company down the street.
Correct.
And we're all adults here.
Right. I think it's, again, it's that you hit the nail on the head, right? They've made the decision to go on this risky journey with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to them. This is the risk that they've taken on.
And I'm not going to like somehow intentionally do something to like thwart that, but no. I'm not taking on responsibility for feeding their family.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. That's the decision they've made, however they came to the conclusion to do it. I am not the only one in the world that's willing to take on some dumb risk, right? And if that risk profile no longer fits them, then that's fine and they can move on. Everybody's replaceable, including myself.
Right.
And I think you just have to remember that there's a world out there past, especially when 9 out of 10 startups fail. Yeah. There's a world out there for you afterwards. There's a world out there for the employees afterwards. Nobody's going to look at you. I give this advice to people all the time when they're thinking about founding a company, and yet I cannot bring it to myself. Nobody's going to look at you.
That's the way it works.
Right, exactly. And say, wow, you founded a company. That was dumb. Right? You're not somebody I want to hire. No, you founded a company. You learned a lot along the way. I love the fact that you hate the word failure. I do too. And I love, it's iterations, it's lessons,
Yeah. Yeah.
and somebody's going to go, wow, man, this is somebody that's gotten decades of lessons and
Right.
iterations. And in a couple of years of building a company, I want them on my team because they're also going to think about things differently. You have to
Right.
remember, again, it's breaking down when we overthinkers and high performers and perfectionists, we make everything so big. And at the end of the day, it's all actually pretty small.
Yeah. Yeah. We can, that's one of my favorite questions to a client is, how can you make this easier?
Yep.
And so you said something, and we're coming to the end of our time, Brittany, but you said something like, we're all expendable, including me.
Yep.
One of the things that I help people with is, as you grow a company, if you want to maximize the value of that company, you need to be completely unnecessary to that business.
Yes.
How are you making yourself unnecessary?
So this is I give similar advice. You have to figure out how to free up your time. Mm-hmm. And that means you have to be willing to separate. If you think about a business is a bunch of different blocks, and it's going to be different numbers of blocks and different types of blocks depending on the stage, right? Yeah, when you just start the business, yes, it's one block and you are kind of responsible.
Right. You're everything. Yeah.
Exactly. And you just take that on. That's the cost at the time of starting the business. But then one day you have a customer facing and a back office facing. Great. I'm better at the customer facing. So I need to be willing to invest and let go of the back office stuff for two reasons. One, I'm not great at it. Yeah. Right? Nobody, if my background was accounting, that would be a different conversation. I am not. Right. I'm customer facing, market facing. And so you need to start to understand where you get the highest leverage from your time and start to allocate those to different resources. This is something where, especially nowadays with AI and other technology, you can outsource it very cheaply, or, as I talked about, even to fractional resources.
Yeah.
And you need to say, what skill level do I have? Because done is better than not done. Because if I have to sit around and wait to do it, not only is it probably not going to be great, but it's going to take me longer to do it versus if I free up an hour of my time and pay somebody $40 an hour, that becomes a force multiplier for me. So that's how as you scale your role, you have to constantly look at, it's actually something I work with my clients on, say, you've got a map, go back and look at it, look at your skill level versus is your leverage level. And that's how you start to identify, what can I offload? And then how much do I have to invest in it? And I do. Hiring our VP of engineering was a great example.
Yeah.
I had to offload it because I had zero skill in it.
Yeah.
And I had to invest in it because the risk of getting it wrong was very high. And so that's where, and the value of having a good one was very high as well, right? So that became an easy go pay him what he's worth conversation versus marketing. Medium skill, not where my best energy is spent. Go hire, we needed to be out there, but I was able to hire, a low leverage, somebody cheap, essentially. Sorry, I was trying to find the nice way to say that. Hire somebody cheap. And now we've actually replaced the copy editors with our GPTs, right? Wow. Yeah. And so even cheaper. And so I think that's how you make yourself indispensable. Pardon me. That's how you make yourself dispensable, is by understanding.
That was an interesting Freudian slip, Brittany.
It was. It absolutely was. Again, do as I say, not as I do. And you have to say, these are the things I'm going to delegate and be fine with whatever the outcome is. Because first of all, it's probably better than what you would do. But two, it's done. And that's it. And that's how, I think that's also, I'm sure you've gone through it as well in building your practice. That's how you actually start to also disassociate with the company and build your own identity. Yeah. And, you're asking about why I do some of these things on the side, because I have to remember the company's now in a good, healthy spot. I have to remember I'm separate from this as well. And one day one day, hopefully the company lives someplace else. And then
Yeah.
I don't want to be just tied to that. So again, it becomes that I'm completely expendable.
What is the last thing you will let go of in the company?
Market identification, but that's and building the strategy. I guess I should call it market strategy, because that is my secret sauce. So
Yeah.
I think it is really important, as you're thinking, as your clients are thinking about this, you really have to understand what your secret sauce is. And
Right.
not a lot of people do. Again, just because you're good at something or can do it doesn't mean it's what you should be doing and spending your time.
I find with a lot of people, it's something that it's just so instinctively natural and easy for them that they don't even recognize it as their secret sauce.
Correct. I honestly didn't know what my secret sauce was until I had to found a company. And that sounds really dumb, but it's because I had to give the elevator pitch on it.
Yeah.
I'd been hired to do my secret sauce all the time, but
Yeah.
people would ask me, just as you did, tell me how you got here. I don't know why I don't know. Right. And I had to actually hold up the mirror and think about it. Well, what's that one thread across my career? Oh, identifying markets and herding the cats to go take over them.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great. Kind of parting words of wisdom, Brittany. Thank you so much for being on the Pick Now podcast, for being willing to go deep on these topics. If you want to see more conversations, hear more conversations like this, make sure and follow the podcast. You can also sign up for my weekly email. Until next time, take care, and thank you for joining us on the Pick Now podcast.